to the place where singles shine, celebrating life, divine by design, in faith and love, we intertwine. Route 77, where your journey's prime.
Welcome to another episode of the Route 77 podcast. Today we're diving deep into a topic that has sparked a lot of debate online. We're discussing the controversial views about singleness, marriage, and the expectations often placed on believers within the church. Have churches been pushing young people away from marriage by encouraging careers and education? Or is there something more at play here? We're going to unpack some heated opinions and explore what the Bible really says about this issue. Buckle up because today's episode is bound to get a little fiery. Welcome to the Route 77 podcast. I am your host, Natasha, and I am here with Monique.
Hello.
And no, David. He has been pretty sick, so he just wasn't up to being on the podcast today. So hopefully he'll be back and better by next time. So
Yes.
I am always on social media, as people might have guessed, with the amount of topics that come from there. And a lot of the groups or things that I tend to look at have to do with singleness or just to see what people are talking about and stuff. So I actually had a friend who is been a friend for a long time on Facebook. He originally started and he runs a Christian dating site. And I was a part of that dating site for being a member, basically, right at the beginning. So I've just been friends with him because of that. And he's a Reformed Christian guy, and the dating site was to be focused on Reformed Christian singles. And so he shares stuff off and on again. And what I found interesting, he shared something, but all he said was thoughts? Question marks. So it wasn't like he's pushing this as a view. He's just reading this and wondering what people think. So this person that he shared this thing of said, the church normalized things which unduly delay marriage. This consequently created a mass of lonely singles within the church. And instead of admitting we are wrong, the church is trying to normalize long-term singleness for people without the gift of celibacy. The fruit has been terrible, and it's only going to get worse. He has an edit. Scripture speaks of fruitful marriage as a gift. There's several verses, and it speaks of celibacy as a gift, from one given only to some. Again, a couple of scriptures. But the gift of singleness is a modern construct not found in Scripture, which I feel is like anti everything that this ministry stands for.
Yeah.
And I will admit, sometimes I just scroll through Facebook for fun if I wake up early. There's a couple of video game content creators that I like to listen to for fun, obviously not singles related. And sometimes I'll just let it play and just back off to sleep because they're talking about some random video game. So it's interesting. That's why I usually scroll it if I've woken up a little bit early than normal. I'm just listening to some videos of interested in and try to go on with life. But then this pops up, and let's just say I did not fall back to sleep, and I spent since seeing it, quite agitated with the comments.
And I seriously think that most of the comments are from married people.
Yeah, and
Married people with children who are saying, no, don't say that because then my kid will never get married and I'll never become a grandparent.
and the person that wrote
I'm not being sarcastic about it.
I think there'll be a lot of sarcasm in this episode.
Oh, well, I think so. Yeah,
And
I
the
think
person
so.
who wrote this, he has a picture of himself and a woman, so I'm assuming it's him and his wife. So he's coming at it from a married perspective. And
Yes.
I'm just taking the first sentence. The church normalized things which unduly delay marriage. I do not know what church he's going to, because
I don't know what things he's talking about.
I know he doesn't really say, but just even, I don't know, like that every single church that I've been in from highly charismatic with my ex to very reformed, where I grew up in, I never ever saw them like always they always were promoting marriage. It was just like that was the way you go. It's not like they hyper promoted it, like they weren't like making sure you're married when you came in the door, but there was absolutely zero things I came across that was the church trying to normalize things that delay marriage. I don't know what churches he's been to that are somehow like normalizing things which delay marriage. I don't know. I can't for the life of me think of what things they are. Now, perhaps if I don't think I can actually go to his site, I guess I could probably Google or Facebook search him and go up to his. Maybe he goes on in his own post with just like what he says, what he means. But that's basically very interesting, just first sentence. This consequently created a mass of lonely singles within the church. I'm pretty sure that the mass of lonely singles has more to do with the emphasis that they're putting on marriage and the undue pressure that's placed on Christian people to get married, especially super young and have right
Right.
away. That's the be all and end all of Christian life. Yeah, I'm with you. I don't know what he thinks is trying to delay marriage. But instead of admitting we're wrong, the church is trying to normalize long-term singleness without the gift of celibacy.
I have a really big question about that one because I don't have the gift of celibacy. I'm pretty sure, being a mom, for one. Where does that come from? The gift of celibacy, isn't that like eunuchs?
But then they talk about how like there's eunuchs, there are people who are make themselves eunuchs like for the kingdom or whatever.
Right.
But but that's the problem is like if we sit there and we go, oh, you have sexual desire, you're not supposed to be single. Like you're a human person that has human inclinations. You're not meant to be single.
So if I have sexual desire, but I don't have a person I'm dating because there is nobody to date. And so what am I supposed to do? Just go and randomly find somebody and get it over with?
You're supposed to get married because you're not fulfilling your role if you're not married and you have sexual desire.
Sexual desire.
And
Let me tell you, my late husband, that's why I married him in the first place, was because of sexual desire, because it was there in spades. And yeah, let me tell you how well that worked out. 90% of the time he slept on the couch. And we had the worst marriage I could ever. So sexual desire is a stupid reason to get married because that's once it's gone, once you get old, then what? You're staring at this person going, why did I marry you? It wasn't all that great anyways.
no. And we put up such a thing about sexual desire and like they were called to be celibate. Outside of the one instance where God allows it, which is a man and woman in marriage, after marriage, we're called to be celibate.
Yeah,
Called
you're
to be
not
celibate
supposed to
up
be
to it. We're called to be monogamous within it, and we're called to be celibate if we
are not married.
become single again for whatever purpose. And what you had the gift of we didn't have the gift of celibacy. Your spouse dies. Let's just say, for argument's sake, you get married at 20, they die at 45 from cancer or something.
Right.
You're still pretty prime of life. Do you think those sexual desires are just like poof, gone, or that you must desperately get married again because you do not have the gift of celibacy?
That's what happened to me. And no, that sexual desire did not go away amazingly. And I tried to find somebody to marry. There was just nobody. There was nobody. There is one guy for every 5 girls. So now what are we supposed to become polygamists? I ain't going to marry a guy with other wives. That ain't happening. Everybody should be married. You know who has the most men for women if you're looking for a husband?
China. Go to China.
Yeah, we'll become communists instead
because China's the place to go to be Christian.
Yeah, my sarcasm isn't going off the scale, is it?
I think we're going to be glad we don't have a sarcasm scale.
I know it's sad, but I made a comment on here, and because this one lady, she was just going on, and I'm just like, you're not seeing clearly, because she says, so what if I invite somebody over to my house? I've got the gift of hospitality, and I'm going, If you're in a habit of inviting people over and you like to do this, then yeah, maybe you do. I don't like inviting people over, but I will be hospitable if I do, although I don't have the gift of hospitality.
But we're called to hospitality.
Yeah.
I'm about to say, we're called to hospitality, just like we're called to celibacy, just like we're called to monogamy within marriage. It's not like you have to be like, do you say, oh, I don't have the gift of monogamy? There was many David and his wives and Solomon and his wives and concubines. I don't have the gift of celibacy or monogamy. So one person responds with the question you had. I wonder what things the church normalized that delay marriage. They should give specific examples if they're going to make that charge, which is what we said. So one person answers college, careers, singleness. And another person says, let's see, a few things I was brainwashed with. Before you got married, you should have a college degree, world travel, buy a house, date for years, etc. Some of those you could see, like I could see dating for years, not super healthy.
That's a non-Christian concept.
Yes. And college degree, nothing wrong with that. World travel, nothing wrong with that. Buying a house, nothing wrong with that.
How are these bad things?
I said, are these bad things? I actually responded, are these bad things? Where specifically college, careers, and singleness. And his answer was, only if marriage and children are good things. I have no good things because I'm not married or have children.
I have a child and she's a good thing. And I was married. That was a bad thing.
And I'm going to college. I have a career and I'm single. So apparently I have all of the bad things.
Are you unhappy with that?
I'm just so,
You're just so miserable
I'm so miserable.
because you don't have the perfect thing, which is somebody who will encroach upon your life. No, my sarcasm. Sorry, it's my sarcasm.
It keeps leaking out.
It keeps leaking out. Marriage is not a bad thing. College, career is not a bad thing. World travel is not a bad thing. Why everybody, this is a human thing. And I'm going to say the S word. I'm sorry, not that S word, another one. And it's called sin because we do the same thing with sin that we do regarding marriage and singleness. We give it degrees. We think that this sin is a lot worse than this sin. So we put them up and, at least I may not be a good person. I've never murdered anybody. So we give the degrees to there. And it's the same with marriage and singleness.
Like, at least we're not Hitler.
Right. I may not be Billy Graham, but I'm not Hitler. In God's eyes, we're all in that same boat. He doesn't care if you're Hitler, and he doesn't care if you're Billy Graham. If you're a sinner, you are a dead person, and you are in that boat just like the rest of us. And until you give your life over to Jesus Christ, and he takes you out of the boat and says, you don't belong in that boat anymore because you're now my child. But even Christians, they do the same thing. You have committed this horrible, terrible sin, and now you're excommunicated. Oh, I can't believe you did that. That's it. You must leave the church. We can't ever have anything to do with you anymore. Because they don't believe that sins can be forgiven. If the person has repented and is asking for help and to move away from the sin that they've committed, why are churches turning their back on them? Just like they turn their back on the singles because we're not good enough? Because we're not married with children? Tell that to the girl who's so desperate to get married that she marries somebody who beats her up every night because the church told her that she has to be married to somebody.
Yeah. And like, that's what I even said at one point in one of the things. I was like, oh, this was one of the mindset was that I need to get married. And even through the abuse that I was going through, I was literally clinging to the fact that at least I'm married. Like,
Right.
that was the redeeming quality of the relationship. And then the people are like, that was basically, that's not the thinking that's the problem. It was the person I chose that was the problem. And can we say victim blaming?
Because they did not set you up for that at all. It's got nothing to do with your husband. It's all your fault.
Yeah, I made a bad decision. I wasn't wise about who I chose.
I hear you.
There are things that I could have done differently. But it's really
Yes, I hear.
hard. It's really hard not to overlook many things when you're like the pressure is so intense. And you're told
Then
constantly
you're
that
telling yourself,
you're constantly being told that marriage and children, you have to be married and have children. If you don't, like, you're not living your fulfilled life in Christ. If you don't, you're missing out on
you're
that's
disobeying
right.
God.
You're disobeying.
That's basically what they're saying, is that if you do not do this, you are disobeying God.
Yeah, you're putting something ahead of God because if you go for especially as a woman, like if you go for a career, then you're putting the career ahead of God. If you go for traveling or experience or mission work, then you're putting that ahead of God instead of the getting married. And the thing is, they don't come out and always specifically say those exact words, but they practically write it in bold print between the lines.
Yeah.
It's not so subtle that you're making it up. This one person says, honestly, I would cry every time they told me to embrace the gift of singleness when I was single, as I desperately wanted to be married. But do you know what the problem was with that? They weren't teaching what it meant to be single. They just give you like generally, and this is how I've experienced it, that you were told there was some sort of high holy calling of being single and that you should just embrace it even when you desired to be married, even when you desired to have kids. Like there never was a teaching or helping you to understand that part of you or what it meant to be single and what it meant to embrace the singleness because they just say these things like platitudes. You don't even know to ask those questions because you feel like you're this unholy person if you don't embrace the gift of singleness because it's misunderstood and it's just construed as some sort of I don't know. It's funny because they're like, you have to get married, but then if you don't, they want you to be like you're this holier person because you get to embrace the gift of singleness and not even explain or teach or doctorally understand what that even means. They
No,
spend
no.
years and years
It
trying to
it's
go, but I want to be married desperately, but I want to be a mom or a dad desperately. So I mustn't have the gift of singleness. We even have this other person who responded, but because he was First Corinthians 7:2, which again, we can have a whole other podcast about this. But because of the temptation to sexual immorality, let each man own a woman and let each woman belong to a man. Let's just forget about the whole fact that was like a really horrible translation that he's using, but just move forward.
is this the one that posted all those biblical verses?
No,
Is he Mormon?
he's responding
Oh,
to this person and he's saying this poster is correct here, although he is somewhat of a hypocrite as he himself forbids biblically defined marriage. I'm not sure. I haven't gone into his stuff to figure that part out. Women are expected to get married. In fact, female singleness and lack of male covering is considered reproachful consistently in scripture, as well as childlessness, even in the case of a faithful widow in 1 Timothy 5 or Ruth. Paul in Romans 1 compares female refusal to marry and bear children to male homosexuality. No, Paul's statement is not specifically about lesbianism. However, it is included as a rejection of marriage and female created purpose. I think we could have a whole podcast on each paragraph from this guy. That's responding.
we've got our next podcast set up for the rest of
David's not going to know what hit him. Women will be saved through childbearing if they continue in faith and love and holiness with self-control. 1 Timothy 2:15. I guess you're safe, Monique. I'm a lost cause. And then in First Timothy, so I would have younger widows marry, bear children, manage their households, and give the adversary no occasion for slander. And then 1 Timothy 5:7, command these things as well so that they may be without reproach. And then Isaiah 4:1, and 7 women shall take hold of one man in that day, saying, we will eat our own bread and wear our own clothes. Only let us be called by your name. Take away our reproach. Exodus 21:10, if he takes another wife to himself, he shall not diminish her food, her clothing, or her marital rights.
He must be Mormon
I don't know.
because he's saying that multiple wives are okay.
I
This is not right.
And he goes through many verses from Ruth and from Genesis and with Rachel and Leah, and it just angers me. What is a woman that they're nothing but breeders and prostitutes kind of thing. Like you're just there to fulfill the man's sexual desire and to make babies. That's like their only purpose for somebody.
Maybe he's just a pervert. Oh, that sarcasm really needs to go away a
It's
little
really coming out.
So I'm just spewing it out because it's just.
It's yeah.
I'm sorry, Lord.
Yeah. Again, another person responded saying that they agree, but they would like to know the things he's referring to. But from her perspective, it's career, college, perfectionism. Again, career and college being bad. We're going to say this is for a woman because we generally don't see that as a negative for men because they're supposed to be the providers. So they got to get the education. But I'm sure that they'll stick some of the men in there if they take too long. Because again, once the men get to a certain age, then they become weirdos if they want to remain unmarried. One person brings up here. So this person, Alexius, so maybe a man, I don't know. Paul was single, he said, for I would that all men were even as I myself. Ministry verse here. Is that not the gift of singleness? But every man has a proper gift of God, one from this vendor and one from another. And a person responds, true, but he's the exception. Marriage is the norm for most of us. I didn't see that part of the verse. Another person responds, it is better to be single, married to God, giving him more of your time. But if you are a weak moron like me, then get married and spend most of your time dealing with your moron wife, kids, and mostly yourself, sinners. So he sounds super happy in his marriage.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that sounded healthy. And then the one who said about Paul's singles verse, responds to the other people saying, my reaction was on those words about the gift of singleness is a modern construct. A modern construct is a forced singleness, even with a vow to remain chaste, etc., as in some Christian denominations is practiced. That's true. Like it's not a modern construct, this gift of singleness, like he's to call that out.
So singleness is not a gift? Or it's not a biblical construct? I don't understand.
It's
Help us.
that they're saying that the gift of singleness, like quote unquote, gift of singleness is a modern construct. It's nowhere biblically, is what the original poster had commented. And this guy, Alexius, was responding to that part of the thing.
Is that true?
I don't think it is a modern construct as we see Paul is talking about it in 1 Corinthians 7:7.
That's what I
They're
thought.
modern. One person saying, you mentioned above the gift of celibacy. That is the gift of singleness. And another person responds, and hardly anyone has it. Then there was responded back, women are probably more common to have it. It does appear rare indeed. Imagine married woman who has the gift, poor husbands. Yeah, that would be awkward. This other one was quite enlightened as he responds back. If they ever desired sex, kids, companionship, or marriage, they don't have it, winky face. So I just said 100% wrong. It's if you ever desire. So basically they're saying the only people who have a true gift of celibacy or singleness are those who are consider themselves asexual, that they have no sexual desire. And I would strongly disagree because, like I said, I believe that gift of celibacy is, or the command for celibacy is, if you're not married in a husband and wife relationship, then you got the gift, just like you've got the gift of singleness.
Yep. Because you have to be, if you're a Christian person and you're not married for whatever reason, even if you're just dating a person, you're not married. So you're celibate right now because you're not supposed to be doing any of that kind of stuff in the bedroom that is reserved strictly for marriage. It doesn't even matter if you're dating, you're
Or
still
wanting-
celibate.
Yeah. So this guy
Okay.
who commented on the fact that if you've ever desired any of these things and you don't have that gift, he makes his own comment to the original post saying, the unnatural push for extended singleness and perfectionism, career, idolatry, especially for young women, the very idea of a career woman having to have a house and a level of income that doesn't just offer security, but also comfort or even luxury, making sure to have a plan B, in place, serial dating, demonizing age gaps, obsessions with sports. Oh, I'm so sorry. Encouraging girls to shun domesticity and put off having children, pet idolatry, sorry, Zeus, winking at the sin of abortion, murder, and such similar things have grossly exacerbated the issue. Also, the indifference towards or even acceptance of no fault divorce has caused massive issues here. Combine this with feckless and effeminate pastors who desperately want attendance, loyalty, and admiration of the divorced single moms in their community, and it is outright toxic. They would never church discipline a young woman guilty of a sinful separation or considering sinfully divorcing a husband without biblical justification being established by multiple lines of witnesses. I see that it's only going one way here, that they wouldn't, he's
Yep.
not worried about whether they would actually discipline a man who was doing the same thing or having affairs.
No, it's always, I really wonder about the people who are replying to this.
And the fact that it's like such a long post. They're too worried that the young feminists seated in the pews will not feel affirmed or excluded somehow, and so they unnaturally, unbiblically, and sinfully cater to her sensibilities. They feed the bitterness of some, they incite and enable gross pietism in others. They make programs for single moms that enable them to remain single. Wow, okay. You have no idea what that woman's gone through. You have no idea that she may not want another man and even touch her, even look at her, let alone
Yeah,
leave her have control over her children. And then
because that's a disaster just waiting to happen. Trust me.
generations of boys are raised fatherless and don't learn to become men, or the single moms have actually brought model men, role models into their lives, but push them for not being married. Or when they do, they're hobbled or well past the age when their drive for marriage and sex was the strongest. So again, seems to be the focus here. If I don't want it because I'm older and I don't have that insane need that you do as a younger person or as a teenager, or that's evil, apparently. Feminism is a cancer that contributes to this. As you can see, it's quite a long post, so he took a lot of time to write it. And if you look at bad teachings regarding financial and or educational requirements before marriage, I didn't even know there was such thing as this, combined with the demonization of age gaps and discouraging domestic and submission in women while encouraging their contentiousness, you end up leaving eligible single men with little or no desirable options unless they look overseas. Wow. Okay. We still have some more.
This person, I may not be the most beautiful person on the planet any longer because now I'm old and whatnot. But even if I were in my 20s and I had somebody say that kind of crap, dude, you sit alone by yourself in the basement, don't you?
Yeah.
I am all that sarcasm just keeps happening.
And it still goes on.
I couldn't even read half of what this guy was saying because it was so ridiculous.
It's amazing
Oh,
that any
this-
churches still have any young couples still getting married. Oh, and the church is winking at or even doggedly supporting grossly unjust divorce and custody laws that drain the resources of men in their churches, who don't care what kind of injustice is done to the men, who will never seek to change these terrible laws and policies, and who will perpetuate lies and deceitful narrative regarding subjects like abuse. Yeah, these churches are making sure that there is exactly zero appeal in marriage and that the men have about zero trust in their leaders. And I'm just gonna quickly point out, I did respond to this, but it was not worth talking about. But basically one person's response to this was, where is it? Where is it? Because he's here. So yeah, he says, this comment should be turned into a small booklet and tracked and set in the foyers of Reformed churches.
Why does it have to be in Reformed churches? Excuse me. Like, what church? I hate this thing. I don't know if you know this about our happy little church. We're actually considered the black sheep of the Reformed churches. Now, there are a few different denominations, and I had to ask about these denominations because I didn't understand about these kind of things. So there are different denominations of the Reformed faith. Some of them are really good churches. Some of them, you have to sit there and go, where did you get your ideas from, people? Where women are not allowed to wear pants. They're only allowed to wear dresses, skirts have to be down past the knees, all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Not allowed to wear makeup. They're not allowed to cut the hair. They're not allowed to wear jewelry. And I'm just like, yeah, I would never go to that church. Thanks. Because that's just not my kind of church. There are also other kinds of churches who are not Reformed faith that I have gone to where the teaching is so suspect that I can't stay in here because, wow, you can't teach that kind of stuff because that is so not biblical. That has absolutely nothing to do with God. God would never say that kind of stuff. And I've walked away from them. If you are not discerning enough, and if you go to these kind of churches, maybe you need to find a different church that teaches true biblical theology, because what this guy was going on about, this is not good theology.
No.
This is not theology at all. This is human opinion gone off to the right, left, somewhere's out in the
Off
stratosphere.
rails anyway.
Totally off the rails. Totally off the rails. I just can't even. I just can't even with that.
It is largely focused on women. They're not submitting. They're not domestic enough. They're getting too much education. They made too much money. They're doing things like buying houses. They don't want to stay home and whatever that means, even though Proverbs 31 woman sounded like she was doing a lot of business, whatever. There's a whole podcast on that one. I want you to be there for sex, not like left and center. And if you don't want it anymore, then wow, that's poor husband. Like it's just, and these no fault divorces, these terms of abuse. Like the thing is, these people, they don't even know what they're talking about, to be honest. And it comes from this high-handed thing. Unfortunately, that is the type of attitude that is mostly developed within a lot of these churches.
When did he reply to this? A day ago. Well, this is really interesting, and I'm wondering if somebody has hacked his page because he hasn't been on since 2019. This is the wonderful thing about Facebook, is that it'll tell you a lot of things about people who post.
Mm-hmm.
And he is a world master champion of the jiu-jitsu.
Who is?
Stuart Allen. If you click on his name, he lives in Tennessee, and he hasn't posted in 4 years. He's only got 2 pictures. I'm wondering if somebody hacked his. It's very
Maybe.
strange.
Yeah, there's another person saying, one thing I was taught in the 1980s and is still taught today, that is that one must be perfectly content to be single and only desire the Lord before getting married. The scripture teaches no such thing, which I think is true. But anyway, it was the Lord who said it is not good for man to be alone, and that was before the fall. Paul said that one should seek marriage if you lack self-control and if you burn with passion. He says nothing about being perfectly content with God alone, only in the sense that he thinks that this is a preferred condition. But he realizes that not everyone has that gift. So if you don't have a gift, you should get married. Jay Adams blasted church elders for not being sensitive to singles who were struggling with temptation and were desiring marriage. He told them to get comfortable with trying to play the role of matchmaker. Because it's like, there is this idea that if you're meant to be single, you will have no sexual desire or temptation or passion or anything until you get married. Like you're supposed to somehow have this magical switch button that you can just flip. Okay, I'm not getting married at this moment, so I better just keep all that sexual stuff going on in my body. Just turn it off until I need it, and then I'll flip it on.
I'm pretty sure that there are millions of women around the world who say, I wish I could do that with my period.
Right?
I'm not having any kids. Can we just shut that
turn it
off for
now?
now?
But I think that this guy is like actually true. This is what people were teaching about being single. You were just supposed to keep a lid on it, and then as soon as you're married, then everything could come out. And that's the problem. I think that became a lot of problem because people didn't know how to be open about their sexuality after they got married. Because you were like told to basically put a lid on it, stuff everything down there. Everything that you thought or felt or tempted about was all evil, even though your body's hormonal and goes through these desires. But you're told that's wrong. You're not married. All these things are wrong. And you just got to bottle it up until that you're married. And then magically, when you're married, all of a sudden you're supposed to be a completely functional sexual being that has no idea because they've been told for years and years that this is evil and wrong. And all of a sudden it's just allowed because you said, I do. And then you're just supposed to function like everything's normal. And I'm not saying go out and have sex before you have marriage. I'm just saying you don't deny that your body has these things and your body feels these things. Like I said, when a woman's going through her different times of the month, like there's a cycle and your hormones go up and down and fluctuate. And there's times when you're more like sexually energized than others. You just learn to understand that it's part of your hormonal process. You feel these things. They're not a bad thing to feel. You have to see that it's appropriate, that what you do with it is appropriate. But
If you don't act,
just because you're hungry, it doesn't mean you have to eat
desire.
something at that moment. I have to eat to live, but you don't have to have sex to live. That's just what. But I'm just saying, like, in the moment that you're hungry,
Like
even if you
crazy.
feel like a craving, oh, I really want sugar. Are you going to die if you don't have a chocolate bar? Just because you have a craving with your food doesn't mean that
Doesn't mean you have
to do it. And that's like what we're doing, like with our diet, trying to like lower the calories. There's times when we're like, oh, I wish I could eat this, but it's just too high calories. But even whenever I'm going, like, oh,
I
I
really want that jambalaya fettuccine because I've been dreaming about it now. And that's 1,300 calories, and I'd have to starve all day just to have
and,
that.
and so amazingly, there's a thing called self-control. We can decide not to follow the craving and instead do something healthier with the desire that we have for food.
And it all starts in the mind. So if you start entertaining the thoughts about what's happening with your body and start turning that desire, that temptation desire thing, you just distract yourself with something else. Pick up your Bible, pray to God, go for a walk. I actually clicked on another one of the names on that link and came upon this woman who talked about that she would cry. And the thing is that she raises a very valuable thing as well. Church, listen here. I thought being a Christian would make it different because it's all about inclusion, but I sit and watch as others are invited to things and I'm still alone. Or I reach out and want to go do something just to feel awkward, like I wasn't welcome there. I've been told I'm too negative just to watch people hang around with people way more negative than I am. It hasn't phased my love for Jesus, who is all inclusive and is my hope, but it hurts that I don't feel accepted by the church. Are you listening? This was something that I went through as well during the early parts of my singleness. It's very easy for people to think they're fine, they don't need us. Yes, we do. We're a family. And if you are not including the people who are standing off to the side, looking like they don't belong, and you're not helping them to belong,
And
are
blaming
they
them
not?
and
And
saying, oh, you just started being the wifely type. If you acted X, Y, and Z, then you would attract a husband and you wouldn't be so lonely.
marriage doesn't fix that
No. And I
because
literally had
you're
people say
lonely.
that to me about, and that was their
Yeah.
solution to singleness.
If you're lonely as a single, you're going to be lonely married. It's not going to make the difference because you're trying to find your fix in somebody who cannot do that. Our expectations of what a spouse will do is going to disappoint you in your marriage. Truthfully, trust me in this. If you don't find it in God, if you don't find your wholeness in the only one who can fulfill you, then it's not going to help. Marriage isn't going to help you. But church, you can't ignore those people that you think aren't your type. Churches tend to be cliquey. So they all gather around in their own little groups. And when I try to infiltrate all these kind of groups because I'm trying to shake people up, get out and meet other people. Look for those people who are standing around looking like they're lost because chances are they are, and try to include them a little bit. Become a family with everybody. That's what God wants us to be.
Yeah.
This is why so many single people are so up in arms when they hear about you just must have the gift of singleness. They don't want that because they're lonely. They want family. And that's what the church is supposed to be. We also have a friend who is in this position, our dear friend Samuel, who has become a child of the living God and left the LGBT lifestyle. He doesn't want that lifestyle. That's not for him anymore. He is a child of God. But he is lonely too. Even though he has thousands of followers, the church still looks at him as a strange object. I've read some of his posts and it just disgusts me that the church treats him like this because he is a wonderful, lovely person. So, church, you need to stop being like that. You need to start being a family to these single people and stop putting them in a box or try forcing them into something that may not be for them or that they're not ready for or that God doesn't have that plan for their life. Give them a chance to be something that they should be, that God wants them to be, not what you think they should be. Soapbox, sorry.
Hey, that's what this is.
This is our soapbox.
This is our soapbox. There's one person that responds, the biggest mistake is failing to raise our sons to be husbands and fathers and daughters to be wives and mothers. Teen marriage is God's way. No. I was actually interested in when we were reading through Genesis, when we looked at a lot of these people when they actually became husbands or wives, like even the husbands, they were quite old by our standards. I think if you look at, I want to say Isaac was like around 40 when he married Rebecca. And you'll even see some of the ones who lived hundreds of years, like they were well into their hundreds before they actually married and had children. We can speculate on what it was like to grow and mature when you lived hundreds of years. Like perhaps it was slowed down, but still 100 years.
I just read a little bit more of this lady's post here. She actually is married and she still laments about being lonely. And her husband, he's gone off to his family. And she says, I don't know. She's obviously suffering from depression. Girl, get yourself some help.
But I think too, like he says, this guy says the biggest mistake is failing to raise our sons and to be husbands and fathers and our daughters to be wives and mothers. And I actually would like to counter that and say, actually, the problem is that we raise our sons to only be husbands or fathers and our daughters to only be wives and mothers. That tends to be the thing. Like the focus is so much on being like, you have to be a husband, so you need to prepare and be ready. And if a man doesn't have a successful career, then they're very looked down upon. And how can you ever support a family on this? And if you're a woman and you do choose a career and you're like, oh, you're not getting ready to be submissive to your husband, instead, perhaps change your language and your ideas a little bit. Raise your sons and daughters to be the children of God, to be godly God followers, and what that looks like. And it's not, there's like verses like 1 Corinthians 13. Teach them what love is. It is patient, it is kind, it is long suffering, it keeps no record of wrongs. Think on these things. Teach them what it means to be a child of God. Teach them the ways of God, which is to have no other gods before you. Respect and honor your father and your mother. Keep the Sabbath day. Do not covet. Do not steal. Do not bear false witness. Do not commit adultery. Drill that into some of them.
Yeah.
And it's just, if we stop focusing on like how we want to like force our children into these roles and start actually just seeing that they're godly people and whatever it is that they are doing in their life, that they're doing it in a God honoring fashion. Like these people, if they meet a person that they can do life with together, like they will become a good husband and wife if they've learned how to be a child of God. Does that mean there won't be any problems and there won't be ups and downs? No, it's called life. It's called sin. But if you focus less on you have to be submissive or you have to be the provider or whatever, if you focus less on that and more on like instead of drilling it into the women that they're supposed to be submitting to their husbands, drill it into the men on how to respect people and how to be sacrificial. Christ sacrificed himself. Stop focusing on what they get out of the marriage, which is a supposedly submissive wife and sex anytime and children all day long. And for women, it's focus on how to respect others, how to show respect for others, how to love others, like you caring for others. Like these are things that will translate into a husband and a wife, a good husband and a good wife. I feel like we spend too much time making sure that they're following these specific set of rules that is supposed to make them a good wife or a good husband or a good father and a good mother, then of understanding that may not be their goal, like their life prospect may not be that, or it might be a while. What if you're not in your 40s till you get married? Do you just bum around for the rest of the time, or do you actually develop a godly life within that time? I just feel like we spend too much time focusing on getting those women ready to be moms and wives and those men being
You know,
husbands and fathers.
the sad thing about all of that too is that they groom them, and I'm going to use that word, I'm sorry. They groom them that way. And then when the women get married to these guys and all of a sudden they're realizing that his income isn't going to be enough to support the family in this economy. Oh yeah, unless you're a multimillionaire, any is not going to be able to afford a single family income. So you are going to subject those children to being raised by strangers or grandparents for as long as those people are alive for. Both of you have to go out to work in order to be able to even afford to feed and clothe your children. And you won't see your children because you're working all the time.
And as a man, like you end up getting put down for that. You should be making enough
Yes.
to, and you should be the one supporting. Your wife shouldn't have to work. Even if you want to be more contemporary and you say she can work if she wants to, not because she has to, which is another
Oh,
condescending way of
so we're
saying
going to
things.
turn these men into workaholics who are going to have to work 7 days a week, 16-hour days just to make ends meet in order for the wife to be able to stay home and raise the kids. People are not thinking clearly here, apparently.
No.
It's foolish.
Yeah. Yeah. We could go on. We could read many more of these, but we would make ourselves more
Yeah.
irate and probably cover the same things that we were just covering because a lot of them are, there's very little pushback.
Except for you and me.
Except for us, yeah, there was the odd person that would say something like, that doesn't seem quite right. But there was not any, like, I was writing a little bit, but one, I don't think it's going to affect anything. People are going to change their mind most likely. And sometimes I just don't want to get caught in the drama of it. I don't think that to give the topic its true justice, being able to just write it in a comment without it becoming a ginormous book, it's just not going to happen. So I just tried to point people to our ministry page and to our podcast to be like, I could write a book. Here's resources that you can go and look at if you want to see my more of what I'm
Yeah.
talking about. We could go on. We've been going on for a while, but we just wanted to comment on it because it just when you feel like you might be making a bit of a difference and you see a lot of people that are actually saying, yes, we need to hear what you're saying more. And we totally agree with you. And then you feel like we just get dragged back into this mentality of the very people that should be championing what the Bible's saying. And they just hide behind these single verses without looking at context or interpretations or like even doing some basic research on it. And it just comes out so misogynistic. It comes out so anti-woman that it actually disservices men because it makes them nothing more than a bag of hormones that can't control themselves. And that's not any better than just a woman being there for kids and housekeeping. And
Mhm.
again, I don't want this to be, this is not any knock against women who want to have kids and take care of the home and don't work outside the home. Like they have their enough stuff to do with their kids. That is not what the purpose of this was. No, it's like when that becomes the epitome of what it means to be a woman instead of
Right.
where God's calling you in the moment that you're in and living it to its fullest, being content where you are and not being like attacked or demonized or whatever because you don't fit this sort of narrow.
Yeah. I was just going to say, and it shouldn't matter whether you're male or female. There are so many reasons why a person is single nowadays. The skew of the statistics that says that there's one man for every 5 women. That is going to leave a lot of women without a husband, unless you want to get into a multiple marriage, which is not me. Thank you very much. Some people just don't want to be married. They don't want that for themselves. And they should be allowed to not have that for themselves. Just like the people who desperately want to be married. There are people who desperately just want to be single. Thank you very much. And you can just go away. But we should not be demonizing people who are married or people who are single. We should be accepting of everybody for whatever it is that they're doing, whether they're married or single, within God's commands.
Commands,
Of course.
yes. But also not
Yeah.
like judging them. Even if
Right.
you don't agree with them, like with how
Yeah.
they're living their, if you believe they're being too feminist or whatever, like it's not your place to go around telling them that they're being
No.
anti-God.
If we told women that they were never allowed to be doctors, do you know how many wonderful, intelligent, fabulous doctors there are? If we told women you can't be a lawyer, you can't be an emergency person, you can't be a CEO of a company, architects,
Anything,
creative,
anything.
women now, we're not living in the 1500s, people. So maybe AI is just going to take over and everybody can just stay home and stare at their TV screens and not care anymore.
Yeah, they can.
The thing.
AI can make the money for everybody. But yeah,
Yeah.
so we could go. We
agree.
could make this like a 5-parter. I'm sure. We
Yes.
went through everything
Yeah.
else.
Although that one person's comment, I am seriously suspicious about what he said, considering that he has not been on Facebook since 2019.
Yeah.
That's odd. And there's nothing on there that even states that he's a Christian. So did somebody hack into his profile and use him as a sounding board?
That's why we just read the comments and see what people respond to them and how there's a whole conversation.
Yeah. And I think it's also a good idea that if you can click on if you're seeing something and the person's going off on tangents and you're going, oh, I wonder what this person, go and check to see what that person is actually, because maybe you're getting somebody's troll comments and not the actual person's comments.
So yeah, it would have been nice to have David's perspective because coming from it, but it is what it is. He may have had COVID. We're not sure if he had COVID. He's not sure if we're 100% sure his brother may have had it. So he's been pretty sick.
Yep.
So
We'll give my best.
And
I'll go and bury my sarcasm somewhere.
sarcasm is strong in this one.
Yeah. I need a shirt.
I'm sure Timu or Wish or something has one like that.
Probably.
So yeah. Anyway, if you enjoyed our show, let us know. If you disagree with us, let us know. If you agree with us, let us know. We're happy to hear from you. Just let us know.
Share with us your comments.
Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and X, and at www.route77.ca, or email us at route77ministries@gmail.com. That's route77ministries@gmail.com, and we will see you here next time.
Bye for now.
Thank you for joining us on this thought-provoking episode of the Route 77 podcast. We know these are challenging topics, and we hope our discussion has given you some new perspectives to consider. Whether you agree or disagree, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and X, and visit us at www.route77.ca for more content. If you have questions, comments, or just want to share your story, feel free to email us at route77ministries@gmail.com. Until next time, keep seeking truth, stay rooted in Scripture, and remember to live your single life to its fullest.